On the coldest New Year's Eve in decades, billionaire CEO Marcus Wellington stood outside a hospital waiting room, holding a small hand-knitted scarf. Inside, a single mother named Sarah Chen sat beside her dying daughter, unaware that the stranger who had just paid her hospital bill was about to uncover a truth that would shatter everything he believed about his own past. What he discovered in the next 72 hours would not only save a child's life, but reveal a secret that connected 3 generations, a secret buried for 30 years. This is a story about sacrifice, hidden truths, and the moment when an act of kindness reveals that we are never truly strangers to those we are meant to help. Sarah Chen had not slept in 36 hours. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a sound that seemed to match the rhythm of her exhausted heartbeat. Outside, the city prepared for New Year's Eve celebrations. Fireworks were already being tested in the distance. Laughter echoed from the streets below. But here, in the pediatric wing of St. Mary's Hospital, time moved differently. Here, every minute felt like an hour. Sarah pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the snow fall. It was beautiful, she thought. Beautiful and cruel. Just like life had been for the past 8 years. Her daughter, Emma, lay in the room behind her. 8 years old, small for her age, fragile in ways that broke Sarah's heart every single day. Emma had been born with a rare congenital heart defect, and for 8 years, Sarah had fought to keep her alive. Every paycheck went to medications. Every extra shift at the diner went to doctor's appointments. Every prayer she whispered went to heaven with the same desperate plea, please, just one more day. But now, the doctors were saying something different. They were saying that Emma needed surgery, immediately. A procedure that cost more than Sarah had earned in the last 5 years combined. Without it, Emma had weeks, maybe days. Sarah had sold everything she owned. She had borrowed from friends who barely had enough for themselves. She had stood outside this hospital and called every charity organization, every assistance program, every miracle she could think of. But miracles, she had learned, did not come to people like her. Mrs. Chen? Sarah turned. A young nurse stood in the doorway, her face kind but professional. Yes? The financial office wanted me to remind you that we need the deposit by midnight tonight, or we'll have to delay the surgery. Sarah felt her knees weaken. I understand. I'm working on it. The nurse hesitated, then stepped closer. I'm not supposed to say this, but I've seen you here every day for the past month. I've seen how much you love your daughter. If there's anything I can do. Sarah managed to smile. Thank you. Really. But this is something I have to figure out myself. The nurse nodded and left. Sarah walked back into Emma's room and sat beside the small bed. Emma was sleeping, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her face was pale but peaceful. Sarah reached out and touched her daughter's hand. I won't let you down, baby, she whispered. I promise. But even as she said the words, Sarah felt the weight of an impossible promise pressing down on her chest. She had 4 hours until midnight, 4 hours to find $30,000, 4 hours to perform a miracle. Sarah pulled out her phone and stared at the screen. She had one last option, one final hope. A distant cousin she had not spoken to in 10 years, a woman who had once offered help but had been met with Sarah's stubborn pride. Sarah had sworn she would never ask anyone for charity. She had sworn she would make it on her own, but pride meant nothing when your child was dying. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Sarah closed her eyes. The tears came then, silent and hot. She let them fall. She had cried so many times over the past 8 years that tears no longer felt like weakness. They felt like all she had left. She did not know that at that exact moment, a man in a tailored suit was stepping out of a limousine 3 floors below. She did not know that this man had just left a New Year's Eve gala where he had written checks for amounts that would have saved Emma's life 10 times over. She did not know that this man was about to walk into her life and change everything. All Sarah knew was that she was out of options, out of time, and out of miracles. But sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. Marcus Wellington had not intended to stop at the hospital that night. He had been on his way home from the Jefferson Industries New Year's Gala, an event where he had smiled for cameras, shaken hands with politicians, and written generous checks to causes he barely remembered. It was the life he had built, successful, influential, and utterly hollow. But as his driver navigated the snowy streets, Marcus had noticed the hospital. St. Mary's, the same hospital where he had been born 57 years ago. The same hospital where his mother had died 30 years ago, alone in a room he had been too busy to visit. "Stop the car," he had said suddenly. His driver had looked confused but obeyed. Marcus stepped out into the cold, unsure why he felt compelled to enter. Perhaps it was the champagne. Perhaps it was the loneliness that always crept in on New Year's Eve. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a pull he could not explain. Inside, the hospital was quiet. A few nurses moved between rooms. A janitor mopped the floors. Marcus walked without direction, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum. He felt out of place here, surrounded by illness and struggle. His world was one of boardrooms and balance sheets. Here, the currency was hope, and it was in short supply. He found himself in the pediatric wing. Through an open door, he saw a woman sitting beside a small bed. She was young, early 30s, perhaps with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were worn and clean. Her face was lined with exhaustion. But what struck Marcus most was the way she held the child's hand. With such tenderness, such fierce love. Marcus had never had children. He had been married once, briefly, to a woman who wanted his money more than his heart. They had divorced quietly, and he had buried himself in work. He had told himself that he did not need family. That success was enough, but watching this woman with her daughter, he felt something stir inside him. Something long forgotten. He turned to leave, not wanting to intrude, but as he did he heard a sound, soft crying. He paused, then looked back. The woman had her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Marcus had walked away from suffering before. It was easier that way, cleaner. But tonight, something stopped him. He knocked gently on the doorframe. The woman looked up, startled. She quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry, visiting hours are over. I have permission to stay, but if you're looking for someone..." "I'm not," Marcus said quietly. He stepped inside. "I apologize for intruding. I was just walking. I saw you and your daughter. Is everything all right?" Sarah almost laughed at the question. Everything was the furthest thing from all right, but she was raised to be polite even to strangers. "We're managing," she said. "Thank you for asking." Marcus nodded. He should leave. He knew he should leave. But he found himself asking, "What's her name?" "Emma. She's 8. She's beautiful." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "She is. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Marcus sat down in the chair across from Sarah. He did not know why. He simply did. "I don't mean to pry," he said carefully, "but you seem troubled. Is there anything I can do?" Sarah looked at the stranger in his expensive suit and felt a wave of exhaustion. What could he possibly do? What could anyone do? "Emma needs surgery," she heard herself say. "Tonight, but I can't afford it. I've tried everything. I've sold everything. I've begged everyone, and I still can't afford it." Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he asked, "How much?" $30,000. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. Sarah watched, confused, as he began to write. "Wait," she said. "What are you doing?" "Helping," Marcus said simply. He tore out the check and handed it to her. "This should cover the surgery and any additional care she needs." Sarah stared at the check. Her hands trembled. $30,000. Written in clean, confident handwriting, made out to St. Mary's Hospital. I don't understand. Why would you?" "Because I can," Marcus said. "And because she deserves a chance." Sarah began to cry in earnest now. Not quiet tears, but deep, soul-shaking sobs of relief and disbelief. Marcus stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. I don't even know your name." "Marcus," he said, "and you don't need to thank me. Just take care of her." He turned to leave, feeling strangely lighter than he had in years. But as he reached the door, Sarah called out, Mr. Marcus? He turned. Why were you here tonight? At the hospital, I mean. Marcus paused. I'm not sure, he admitted. I suppose I was looking for something. Did you find it? He looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully, and then at Sarah, whose face was now filled with hope instead of despair. Yes, he said quietly. I think I did. Emma's surgery was scheduled for 6 the next morning. Sarah had not left her daughter's side all night, but for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than terror. She felt hope. The doctors had accepted the check immediately. The surgical team had been assembled. Everything was in motion. But Sarah could not stop thinking about the man in the gray suit. Marcus. He had disappeared as quickly as he had arrived, leaving behind a miracle and 100 unanswered questions. Why had he helped her? Who was he? And why had there been such sadness in his eyes? At 5 in the morning, a nurse came to prepare Emma for surgery. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered promises she now believed she could keep. I'll be right here when you wake up, sweetheart, right here. Emma smiled weakly. I know, Mama. They wheeled her away and Sarah was left alone in the room. She sat down and allowed herself to breathe, to really breathe. For the first time in what felt like forever, as she sat there, she noticed something on the floor beside the chair where Marcus had sat. A wallet, expensive leather, monogrammed with the initials M.W. He must have dropped it. Sarah picked it up, intending to take it to the front desk. But as she opened it to find identification, something fell out. A photograph, old and faded, black and white. Sarah's heart stopped. The photograph showed a young woman, no more than 20, holding a newborn baby. The woman was Asian, with delicate features and a soft smile. She was sitting in a hospital bed wearing a gown, and in the corner of the photograph, barely visible, was a sign on the wall, St. Mary's Hospital, maternity ward. But that was not what made Sarah's hands begin to shake. The woman in the photograph was wearing a necklace, a simple silver chain with a small jade pendant carved in the shape of a lotus flower. Sarah reached up and touched her own neck. Beneath her shirt, hidden from view, was an identical necklace, the only thing she had left from her mother, who had died when Sarah was 3 years old, her mother, whose name had been Lin Chen, her mother, who had given birth to Sarah at St. Mary's Hospital in 1992. Sarah turned the photograph over. On the back, in faded ink, were words that made her heart pound, Lin and baby. January 2nd, 1992. St. Mary's. Sarah's birthday was January 2nd. She looked at the photograph again, her mind racing. This could not be a coincidence, but what did it mean? Why did Marcus have a photograph of her mother, a photograph taken on the day Sarah was born? Sarah's hands trembled as she searched through the wallet. There were credit cards, business cards for Wellington Industries, a driver's license with Marcus's photograph and address, and then, tucked behind everything else, another photograph. This one was in color. Recent. It showed Marcus standing beside an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes. On the back, written in the same handwriting as the first photograph, were 2 words. Mother. Always. Sarah sat down heavily. Her mind spun with possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Could Marcus have known her mother? But how? Why? She thought back to the night before, to the way Marcus had looked at Emma. The sadness in his eyes, the way he had helped without hesitation, as if compelled by something deeper than kindness. Sarah made a decision. As soon as Emma was out of surgery and stable, she would find Marcus Wellington. She would return his wallet, and she would ask him the questions that were now burning in her chest. Because somehow, impossibly, the stranger who had saved her daughter's life was connected to her own past, and Sarah had spent her entire life wondering where she had come from. Her mother had died without telling her much. Sarah had been raised by a distant aunt who knew little about Lin Chen's life before Sarah was born. All Sarah had were fragments. Her mother had come to America alone. She had worked as a seamstress. She had loved her daughter fiercely, but had never spoken about family or the past. And now, 30 years later, a man Sarah had never met carried a photograph of her mother in his wallet. The universe, Sarah thought, worked in mysterious ways. Emma's surgery was a success. The doctors emerged after 4 hours with news that made Sarah weep with relief. The repair had gone better than expected. Emma's heart was strong. With proper care and rest, she would live a normal, healthy life. Sarah had stood in that hospital corridor and thanked God, the doctors, the nurses, and the memory of a stranger named Marcus, who had made it all possible. But she still had his wallet, and she still had questions. It took Sarah 2 days to find the courage to contact him. She found his office number on one of the business cards and called, expecting a secretary or assistant. Instead, Marcus himself answered. "Marcus Wellington. Mr. Wellington, this is Sarah Chen, from the hospital. You helped my daughter." Sarah. His voice softened immediately. "How is Emma?" "She's wonderful. The surgery was a success. She's going to be fine, thanks to you." "I'm very glad to hear that." Sarah took a breath. "Mr. Medimi, Wellington, you dropped your wallet at the hospital. I have it. I'd like to return it to you." There was a pause. "Of course. Would you like me to send someone to pick it up?" "No," Sarah said quickly. "I'd like to return it myself, if that's all right." "There's something I need to ask you." Another pause, longer this time. "All right. Would tomorrow evening work? I can give you my address. Tomorrow would be perfect." The next evening, Sarah stood outside an apartment building that looked like something from a magazine. Doorman, marble lobby, elevator with gold trim. She felt out of place in her worn coat and simple dress, but she had come too far to turn back now. Marcus answered the door himself. He looked surprised to see her but welcomed her inside warmly. His apartment was elegant but not ostentatious. Books lined the shelves. Classical music played softly in the background. Through the windows, the city sparkled with lights. "Please, sit," Marcus said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "Can I get you something to drink? Tea? Coffee? No, thank you." Sarah sat, clutching her purse where she had placed the wallet and the photograph. Marcus sat across from her. "I'm truly happy to hear about Emma. That must be a great relief." "It is. More than I can express." Sarah hesitated, then pulled out the wallet. "I found this. I wanted to return it. Thank you. I hadn't even realized I'd lost it." Sarah pulled out the photograph. "And I found this inside." She held it out. Marcus took it and his face changed. The color drained from his cheeks. His hands began to shake. "Where?" he began, then stopped. "That's my mother," Sarah said quietly. "Lin Chen. This photograph was taken the day I was born, January 2nd, 1992, at St. Mary's Hospital." Marcus stared at the photograph, then at Sarah, then back at the photograph. "Your mother," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes. Why do you have a photograph of my mother, Mr. Wellington?" Marcus stood and walked to the window. He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I knew your mother," he said, 33 years ago." Sarah's heart pounded. "How?" Marcus turned to face her. "I was 24, fresh out of business school. Arrogant and ambitious. I had just started working at my father's company. I thought I knew everything." He paused. "I met Lynn at a community center where I was volunteering. It was a requirement for some award I wanted. I didn't care about the work. I just wanted it on my resume." He sat down again, his hands clasped. "But then I met her. She was teaching English to new immigrants. She was radiant, kind, patient. Everything I wasn't. We became friends. And then, more than friends." Sarah felt tears building. "You were together?" Marcus nodded. "For 8 months. The happiest 8 months of my life. But my father found out. He forbade it. Said she wasn't suitable. Wasn't from the right background. He threatened to disown me, to remove me from the company. And you chose the company," Sarah said, her voice flat. "I chose wrong," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. I broke things off with Lynn. Told her it wouldn't work. That we were from different worlds. She was heartbroken. I was cruel. And a month later she disappeared. I tried to find her, but she was gone." Sarah wiped her eyes. She was pregnant. Marcus looked at her and understanding dawned in his eyes. "With you." "She never told you?" "No, I didn't know." I swear I didn't know." Marcus's voice was desperate now. "If I had known, God, if I had known, everything would have been different." Sarah stood and walked to the window, trying to process everything. This man, this stranger who had saved Emma's life. He was her father. "My mother raised me alone," Sarah said quietly. "She worked herself to exhaustion. She died when I was 3. Pneumonia that she ignored because she couldn't afford to miss work. I was raised by her sister, my aunt, who did her best but never really wanted me. I spent my whole life wondering who my father was, wondering if he knew I existed, wondering if he cared." "Sarah," Marcus began, but she held up a hand. "And now I find out that my father is a millionaire who could have given us everything, who could have saved my mother's life, who could have made sure I never had to struggle." "I didn't know," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face now. "Please believe me. If I had known." "But you didn't ask," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "You just walked away. You made your choice." The room was silent except for the distant sound of the city below. Finally, Sarah spoke again, softer this time. "Why did you keep her photograph?" Marcus looked down at the picture still in his hands. "Because even though I was a coward, even though I made the worst mistake of my life, I never stopped loving her. I kept this photograph as a reminder of what I'd lost, of what I'd thrown away for money and status and my father's approval." He looked up at Sarah. "And now I find out I didn't just lose her. I lost you. I lost a daughter, and God help me, I would give everything I have, every dollar, every building, every achievement, to go back and make a different choice." Sarah felt something crack inside her. All the anger, all the pain, all the years of loneliness. But beneath it all was something else, a tiny spark of something she had never allowed herself to feel. Hope. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said honestly. "I don't expect you to," Marcus replied. "I don't deserve it. But Emma deserves to know her grandfather." Marcus looked up, his eyes wide. "Not because you've earned it," Sarah continued, "but because she deserves to have family. Real family. And because," her voice broke, "because I wanted a father my whole life. And maybe it's not too late." The next few weeks transformed Marcus Wellington's life in ways he had never imagined. He visited Emma every day. At first he came with gifts, toys, books, stuffed animals, but Sarah had gently told him that Emma didn't need things. She needed presence. So Marcus learned to simply sit and talk with his granddaughter. He read her stories. He listened to her talk about her friends and her dreams. He learned that she loved art and wanted to be a painter someday. And slowly, carefully, he began to build a relationship with Sarah. It was not easy. There were moments of tension, of old pain rising to the surface. Sarah would remember her mother's struggles and anger would flash in her eyes. Marcus would think of all the years he had missed and guilt would overwhelm him. But they persevered. They talked. Really talked, about Lynn, about the past, about mistakes and regrets and the possibility of something better. Marcus told Sarah stories about her mother, about how Lynn had loved poetry, how she had dreamed of opening her own dress shop someday, how she had the most beautiful laugh he had ever heard. Sarah shared memories too. Few though they were precious. She told Marcus about how her mother used to sing Chinese lullabies, how she had made Sarah's clothes by hand, how even when they had nothing, Lynn had always made Sarah feel loved. And through it all, Emma healed, her color returned, her strength grew. The doctors were amazed at her progress. One afternoon, Marcus arrived at the hospital to find Emma sitting up in bed, drawing. She smiled when she saw him, a smile that made his heart ache with love and loss. "Grandpa Marcus," she called out. She had started calling him that the week before, tentatively at first, but now with confidence. "Hello, sweetheart. What are you working on?" Emma held up her drawing. It showed 3 people holding hands. A little girl, a woman, and a man. "It's us," she said proudly. "It's our family." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. Sarah, sitting in the chair beside Emma's bed, reached out and squeezed his hand. "It's beautiful," Marcus managed to say. Emma beamed. Then her face turned serious. "Grandpa Marcus, Mama told me that you knew my Grandma Lynn, the one I never met." "Yes," Marcus said carefully. I did. Was she nice? She was the nicest person I ever met. Do you miss her? Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Emma thought about this. Mama says that people we love never really leave us. They stay in our hearts. Is Grandma Lynn in your heart? Yes, Marcus whispered. Always. Good, Emma said, satisfied. She went back to her drawing, adding more details. Marcus watched her, this beautiful child who shared his blood, and felt something shift inside him. For 30 years he had been successful by every measure the world cared about: wealth, power, influence. But he had been empty, hollow, going through the motions of a life that meant nothing. Now, sitting in this hospital room with his daughter and granddaughter, he felt whole for the first time. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, Sarah and Marcus sat in the hospital cafeteria over terrible coffee. She's getting discharged next week, Sarah said. The doctors say she needs rest and monitoring, but she can come home. That's wonderful news. Sarah nodded. Then, quietly, I've been thinking about what comes next. Marcus waited. I can't afford the apartment we've been living in, Sarah admitted. I had to use all my savings for other medical bills before the surgery, and I can't work full shifts at the diner while Emma recovers. I'm going to have to find something smaller, cheaper. Marcus chose his words carefully. I would like to help, if you'll let me. Sarah looked at him. I don't want your money. I know, but I'm not offering out of guilt. I'm offering because you're my daughter, and Emma is my granddaughter, and I've missed 30 years. I can't get those years back, but I can be here now. Please let me be here now. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. What did you have in mind? I own a building across town. Residential, safe neighborhood, good schools. There's a 3-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor. It's sitting empty. You and Emma could live there. No rent. And I could help with medical bills, with whatever you need. Marcus, I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness, he said quickly. I know I can't, but I can try to make things easier. I can try to give you and Emma the stability you deserve. Sarah felt torn. Part of her wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence, her pride, but she thought of Emma, of the long recovery ahead, of the chance to give her daughter a safe, stable home. Okay, she said finally. We'll accept, but on one condition. Anything. You're not just our landlord, you're family. That means Sunday dinners. That means showing up. That means being present in Emma's life, in my life. Can you do that? Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Yes, I can do that. I want to do that. Sarah smiled, a real smile. Then we have a deal. They shook hands and then, awkwardly but genuinely, they embraced. It was the first time Sarah had hugged her father. It would not be the last. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the living room of their new apartment and marveled at how much had changed. The apartment was bright and spacious, with large windows that let in generous sunlight. Emma's room was painted her favorite color, lavender, and filled with art supplies. Sarah had her own room for the first time in years, and there was even a small office where Sarah had started taking online business courses, because that was the other change. Marcus had not just given them a home, he had given Sarah an opportunity. He had offered her a job at Wellington Industries, managing their new community outreach program. It was work that mattered, helping people the way Marcus wished he had helped Lynn all those years ago. At first, Sarah had been hesitant. She had no degree, no experience in corporate work. But Marcus had believed in her. And slowly, Sarah had started to believe in herself. Emma's health had continued to improve. She was back in school, thriving, making friends. Her art teacher said she had real talent. She had even entered a local art competition and won second place. But the biggest change was the relationship growing between Sarah, Emma, and Marcus. Sunday dinners had become sacred. Marcus would arrive at 6 o'clock sharp, usually with dessert from Emma's favorite bakery. They would cook together, eat together, and talk for hours. Marcus taught Emma to play chess. Sarah taught Marcus to cook Chinese food the way her mother had made it. They visited Lynn's grave together on her birthday, bringing flowers and stories. Marcus would stand there and apologize to the woman he had loved and lost. Sarah would tell her mother about Emma, about their new life, about the family they had become. It was not perfect. There were still moments of pain, of old wounds surfacing, but they faced them together. One Sunday evening as they finished dinner, Emma announced, "I made something for you, Grandpa Marcus." She ran to her room and returned with the painting. It showed a hospital corridor, rendered in soft blues and grays. In the corridor stood a man in a gray suit and a woman sitting on a bench. They had not met yet in the painting, but you could tell they were about to. "It's the night you saved us," Emma said. "I wanted to paint it so we never forget." Marcus took the painting with trembling hands. "Emma, this is extraordinary. Mama told me that sometimes the worst nights turn into the best things," Emma said wisely, "because if you hadn't come to the hospital that night, we never would have found you, and you never would have found us." Sarah felt tears running down her face. "That's exactly right, sweetheart." Marcus hung the painting in his own apartment, in a place of honor. Every morning, he would look at it and remember. Remember the night he had almost walked away. Remember the miracle of second chances. Remember that it was never too late to do the right thing. The years that followed brought more changes. Sarah completed her degree and eventually became director of the Wellington Foundation, turning it into one of the most effective charitable organizations in the city. Emma grew into a talented young artist who used her work to raise awareness about children's health issues. And Marcus, who had once measured his worth in dollars and deals, learned that true wealth was measured in moments. Moments like Emma's high school graduation, where she gave a speech about second chances, and the grandfather who had taught her that family was not just about blood, but about showing up. Moments like the day Sarah got married to a kind man named David, and Marcus walked her down the aisle with tears of joy streaming down his face. Moments like when Emma's first gallery showing sold out, and the three of them stood together, looking at paintings that told their story. Marcus lived to be 83 years old. In his final days, surrounded by Sarah and Emma's own children, he held the same photograph he had carried for decades. The photograph of Lynn, holding baby Sarah. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he whispered, "but I'm so grateful I found my way back." "You did, Dad," Sarah said, holding his hand. "You found your way back." And when Marcus closed his eyes for the last time, he did so knowing that he had been loved, that he had loved, that he had been given the greatest gift anyone could ask, for the chance to make things right. This story teaches us that it is never too late to make things right. Life gives us many chances to choose between what is easy and what is right. Marcus chose wrong the first time, letting fear and ambition rob him of love and family. But when given a second chance, when fate brought him to that hospital on New Year's Eve, he chose differently. We learn that kindness creates connections we cannot always see. Marcus helped a stranger without knowing she was his daughter. His act of compassion opened a door to redemption he didn't know existed. We learn that forgiveness is not about forgetting the past, but about choosing hope for the future. Sarah had every right to turn Marcus away, but she chose to give him a chance, not because he deserved it, but because she and Emma deserve family. We learn that true wealth is not measured in bank accounts, but in relationships. Marcus had millions, but was empty until he had Sarah and Emma. Most importantly, we learned we are all connected in ways we cannot understand. The stranger we help today might be the answer to our own prayers tomorrow. The kindness we show might heal wounds we didn't know existed. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us of the power of faith, humanity, and second chances. And remember, it's never too late to do the right thing. It's never too late to show up. It's never too late to love. Thank you for listening. Until next time, may you find the courage to be kind and the wisdom to believe in second chances.